I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. Get healthy.
I mix what I like,
We're here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy liked and other cool things.
What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Liberation Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Good Monday morning. Welcome. Come on in. Get comfortable. Do all the things, like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, tag Black Liberation Media so we know that you're out there supporting the work. Make sure you have the bell rung. Do all of the things. In a little bit, I'll run the interview that I recorded, yesterday with John Potash about his latest film. Fascinating discussion about the role of intelligence agencies in the distribution of drugs and more. So definitely stay tuned and stick around for that. Please also check the show description for more on this weekend's brief trip to Philly. And again, it's wild that the voice you hear at the end of my little intro there, she's now fully, well, I guess not technically fully grown. She's 18 now, in college, and joined me yesterday. Well, what was for me now, this is obviously pre-recorded, but joined me Saturday for a little trip up to Philly to check out the film screening for Mtume Gant. So check the link in the show description if you're interested in a little bit more on that. Obviously, more will be on its way to this platform in the not too distant future, but it was a great event. Ran into a number of supporters of the platform, so salute to all of you. Met a number of folks that we've only interacted virtually. So it was a great event. Got to see Jared Ware again, and it was a good time, very good time. And the films, I told him to me, I just didn't know. He is obviously brilliant, and he's much more talented than I was aware. As a director, as an actor, as an MC, I just didn't know. So there's much more that we'll have to get into with him about all of that. But we watched his film Spit, where you get to see him spit. We watched his film The Mold of Malachi, which and then Whiteface. And these are, I mean, what I told him afterwards was it made me more upset about the world we're forced to suffer. Because what we see is that it was just another reminder, and I'm not involved enough in the independent arts scene to get this on a regular basis, but it was a reminder of, yet again, how much talent there actually is. And that we are forced to suffer not only bad performances, bad acting, bad films, but a suppression of other people's genius, because I don't even think that everybody who's forced to produce this nonsense is untalented. I think quite the opposite. And we got to see a lot of that and it's inspirational in terms of what it seems that we can do more of in producing, in this case, film, without this fantasy. Again, it's the media equivalent to my argument around politics. The idea that we need to have Hollywood money to catch up, to equate ourselves to Hollywood, is part of the imposed fantasy that happens politically. We don't need, because we cannot get Democratic Party, Republican Party funding to match and overtake their impact. What we just need are different approaches, more people, different behavior. So in that sense, it was inspirational. So salute to Mtume, Jared Ware for setting up the event, Making World's Bookstore for hosting it. The good people for coming through. It was a good time. Good time. And I can't wait for us to have the screening of those films on our platform and to talk more with Mtume about the work. It's fascinating stuff. So you can go get a little taste of it, I suppose. Again, in links are in the show description. But initially, what we're going to do, what I'd like to do right now is take a little time to talk about cryptocurrency, Vice President Harris, and this Harris plan for black male or black men's economic development. Before we get to the Potash interview, which is, again, fascinating. So a couple people, by the way, have I've seen in the comments, caught a few of the comments around Monday morning shows being shorter. And on one hand, I apologize. I do have to pre-record during the semester because I got to do that 4-4, that HBCU 4-4 teaching load. But the other thing is, so that because of the pre-recording, StreamYard limits programs to 2 hours if we want to upload it for it to stream out for us live. So there's a little bit of a StreamYard limitation along with the scheduling limitation. That said, I definitely appreciate that essentially what you all were saying is you want more JB. Who could complain? Who could be mad at that? Oh, the chat must be loving that one. Yeah. All right, so all right, everybody, let's go ahead and get to let's have a little bit of discussion about a recent story in The Intercept about Vice President Harris, cryptocurrency, and then we'll get into a couple of other things before we talk the CIA and drugs are us. All right, so this story came out the other day in The Intercept, and the reasons for, I think I mentioned the other day, we'll get to the reasons why I am, of course, focusing on it. But in general, it raises some again, just fascinating and revealing bits and pieces about Vice President Harris and the messaging targeting black audiences in particular. And so the title is, After Major Industry Donor Pops Up, Harris Makes Bizarre Proposal, Crypto for Black Men. Losing black voters to Donald Trump, the Harris campaign has an idea for helping Black men. But what does it mean? Matt Sledge is the author, and October 21st is the date. This is Harris sporting an outfit. It seems like she's been wearing a variation of in a lot of these videos I've been seeing, like when she went to the black barber shop and, the relax. She's got the jeans on, and I think this is part of I don't know. She's going to the churches, and I don't think she was wearing jeans to the church. I wouldn't dare put that on her, but and this is, she's speaking at a campaign event in Oakland, but anyway, as the story says here, days after a leading crypto industry figure endorsed her, Vice President Kamala Harris gave cryptocurrencies a vague embrace this week as part of a pitch to black men. Along with a pledge to legalize weed, the policy document released by Harris's campaign, and we're going to look at that in just a minute, Monday made a bid for black men's votes with ambiguous wording about regulating crypto. The move left industry critics wondering whether she backs strong or weak safeguards at a time when the industry is pouring money into political races. As we talked about the other day, crypto is spending more than $200 million on the congressional campaigns of friendly candidates. They're responsible for over half of the corporate donations to the presidential campaigns so far. And while they've mostly backed Donald Trump, there's been some heavy money apparently coming in to Kamala Harris's campaign as well. And as it says here, crypto skeptics were divided on how to interpret Harris's comments, with one saying that they seem to be aimed as much at donors as voters. What she is doing is reflecting the will of some of her funders, said Jared Ball, a professor of communication and Africana Black Studies at Morgan State University, which is to get some policy support to give engagement in crypto trading more legitimacy, which is just going to help fleece more people, end quote. I agree with that. I agree with that comment. That guy's pretty sharp. Since entering the race in July, Harris has courted business leaders who took a dour view of the Biden administration thanks to its enforcement of antitrust and securities laws. Ding, 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 ding. That cohort includes the Silicon Valley venture capitalists Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, who announced their support for Trump days before Biden dropped out of the race. Their firm, Andreessen Horowitz, has invested billions of dollars in cryptocurrency, moves that coincided with scrutiny of crypto by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And we've covered Andreessen Horowitz before, and as more of the argument more of the previously made argument around conservative elite, of course, white billionaire investors in this cryptocurrency field, which is still touted as something that is supposed to free and liberate African people. The illogic is staggering. Once a critic, Trump has turned into a crypto booster, shockingly, since launching his campaign. At a crypto conference in July, Trump said the industry's regulations would be written by people who love your industry, not hate your industry. More recently, he's been shilling a cryptocurrency of his own. And we're going to get to what I think is part of the crux for this. And I am going to stop here to sort of pat myself on the back, and more importantly, to praise the analysis that many of us in these spaces deal with, because it's obviously not really about me. It's about the proper political education and frame to understand what devices like this are, even before getting into all the nuances. And I recognize the contradiction of me saying that, but without even getting into a lot of the details of the technology, it's the messaging, it's the call for investment, it's the positioning of these devices as liberatory that should first ring a lot of bells. But but specifically, I'm going to and come back to this in a moment, that debate that I had with Reggie Middleton, even at an earlier stage of my own understanding of all of this, I was exactly right in my presence challenged him to expose his hand, that is, in trying to define his Veritasium product as a token as opposed to a coin or currency, to avoid certain levels of regulation. And that people who want to speculate and do Ponzi and fleece investors and rug and pull and do all of these things, they don't want the more stringent SEC managing them, monitoring it to the extent that they're sufficient. They want the Commodities Trading Commission to be involved because they're far less investigatory. All of which is to protect the hustler and scam the hustlee, the to be hustled. All right, but again, I've somewhat jumped ahead, but that's really, but the point really is the political analysis, the frame, the certain approaches to study, whatever. It's being in spaces like these that helps protect all of us from all forms of financial and political and ideological hustles. So, any event. So while Donald Trump made his 180, as the article continues here, Harris has been far more circumspect. Behind the scenes, however, she has engaged with industry insiders. This seems to be her thing. Remember, it's behind the scenes she meets with Netanyahu. Behind the scenes, she's meeting with industry insiders. But her public presentation, as we're going to continue to see, particularly to Black people, is woeful. And she's continuing. I even saw another one on her sort of junket, if it appears, tour with Roland Martin, as he's helping pave the way for her to be understood in the Black community. I did see a little bit of the Forbes coverage, oddly enough, of her visits to Black barbershops. And we're going to see, it doesn't even matter to... All of it is a representation of what we're going to be looking at here this morning. So, and it's absurd. In an October 4th post on X, Horowitz, a longtime friend of Harris, I mean, need we say more? Said he had several conversations with Harris and her advisors, saying he was encouraged by the discussions. Horowitz announced that he was making a large donation to the Harris campaign. As we stated earlier, the Biden administration has been exceptionally destructive on tech policy across the industry, but especially as it relates to the crypto blockchain and AI, Horowitz said. So while I'm very hopeful that the Harris administration will be much better, they have not yet stated their intentions. Harris rolled out her most direct statement on the issue in a policy paper helping Black men. This opportunity agenda for Black men, which is well summarized here, but I will sort of pause here for a second so that we can just take a quick look at this policy paper. Black men and boys deserve a president who will provide the opportunity to unleash this talent and potential by removing historic barriers to wealth creation, education, employment, earnings, health, and improving the criminal justice system. Of course, I'll put all the links to everything so you can see for yourself in greater detail and of course, check my interpretation of all of this. But first, we have to our memories should be recalled to the fact that Harris and Biden have been in office for 4 years. So this idea that even as she's rebranding and repackaging the same exact talking points of Democratic Party politicians for decades, we should be reminded that you've been in office with the pulpit, the media access, and allegedly the political power to influence all of these types of things, to already have done much of this. Just want to quickly point that out, just real quick. But as she says here, this year, Vice President Harris launched a first of its kind nationwide economic opportunity tour to help entrepreneurs access the capital and resources they need to launch and grow their businesses, build wealth, and strengthen their communities, especially Black male entrepreneurs. While traveling across the country to cities like Atlanta, Detroit, and Charlotte, she heard powerful stories from Black men about the biggest hurdles that still make it too difficult for them to get their businesses off the ground and grow them to meet their full ambitions, and discussed policies that can help break down remaining barriers to success. So this is why she's been going on Earn Your Liberation and doing these this again junket tour with Roland Martin. It is, as the Intercept article pointed out, she's losing Black voters, relatively speaking, and at the same time wanting to continue to portray herself as a spokesperson for Black people, and then to portray her party as offering something, the first of its kind, this nationwide economic opportunity tour, to go and listen to what ails the Black community and to discover and develop Black capitalist entrepreneurial solutions. This is somehow a first of its kind, to regurgitate already proven failed policies. But we're gonna see again what this is. This is ultimately very revealing. So part of what she's offering here is 1 million loans that are fully forgivable to Black entrepreneurs, a regulatory framework for cryptocurrency, education and job training and mentorship programs, legalizing recreational marijuana. That's her 5-point overall plan. She elaborates a little bit more. It's elaborated a little bit more here below, but the real plan is to blame Trump. So immediately in her plan, what is supposed to be her explanation of what she's doing for Black men, she summarizes some nonsense and then says it's Trump that's making it harder for Black men. Defunding urban this and defunding that, and it's Trump that's the problem. But again, Trump hasn't been in office these last 4 years. Trump hadn't been in office the 8 years prior to his first presidency. And yet all of this is now for the first time ever. Again, this is, to the extent that this claim is true, that this is a first of its kind, this should be seen as an indictment of her own party, not praiseworthy. This is a confession of what her and her party have not done or have proven incapable of doing, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So what did she mean by that? Providing 1 million loans of up to $20,000 to Black entrepreneurs, which does what for a Black business? $20,000, which even if you don't have to pay it back, what does it do? And then we're doing tax deductions for small businesses. But we talk all the time around here, all the data showing how this is insufficient, ineffective. Black businesses don't survive, don't make a lot of money, don't target an affluent consumer base. are competing against an already accumulated and monopolized environment, so on and so on and so on. But $20,000. Now, the fact again that you all haven't done this already is a confession. By the way, and this is such a beautiful part right here. Because good people, on November 1st, I love the show. Watch it all the time. Used to listen to it when it was on audio, but I have never been more excited about a forthcoming episode of Brokish than I am right now. On November 1st, when the next episode drops, I'm telling you, we need to have a watch party. You need to make sure everyone you know sees this. We need to make this video go. This video that is about to drop on November 1st from Brokish, we owe it to the culture to make it go viral. Because speaking of confessions, it is an entire confession from one of the greatest proponents in the modern era of Black capitalist mythology, the Roland Martin sponsored, supported, the Black bourgeoisie supported, but ultimately the spokesperson of white capital for two Black audiences, John Hope Bryant, will give you more than an hour in that episode of inexpertise, inaccuracy, patriarchal condescension. It is a masterclass in all that is wrong in commercial media spaces regarding Black economics, about race and class, this nonsense around financial literacy. Masterclass. We have got to watch it. And Brokish should get an award, a journalism award, an emancipatory journalism award. For helping expose. Speaking of expose, we just happen to gotta fix that. Of helping to expose seriously what is the flaws in these messaging, in this messaging. And how and you can see where a lot of what we end up dealing with in my classroom, in our lives is coming. But this is what why I'm reminded of it right here. Because one of the things John Hope Bryant, you'll see him do on the 1st, is he will try to tell Erica and Amber that all you need to do is pay him for his courses into how to improve your credit score, and then there is no more problem with capitalism. And I know I'm overly simplifying even his nonsensical, illogical argument. Watch the show, but that's essentially, that's his large overarching theme. Get your credit score into the 700s and everything opens up to you. Mortgages, loans, credit, everything, the world, everything. And when asked specifically by Erica, but even when you have the credit score and get the home, either the home is devalued or you don't get the loan because your race speaks against even your credit score. Brian said that's absolutely not true. And whatever you think you're reading, but even in this document right here, Vice President Harris is using reports. This one, I did look at it. It's an MIT study that they're referencing here that says Black Americans are twice as likely to be denied credit by banks, regardless of their credit scores. So, John Hope Bryant, you are literally contradicting the woman you are saying we must vote for president. Your president, John Hope Bryant. You are contradicting. I cannot wait. But we'll see more about it. Again, please do not take my word for it. Tune in on the 1st for the next episode of Brokish and see for yourself. Oh, I know we're going to have a lot of fun with that. It's going to be beautiful. In all seriousness, no, it's not. It's not though. It's sad. It's disturbing. It's frustrating that people doing, and Brian doesn't even know what I know. And one day you all will know that not only, never mind their already existing expertise between Erica and Amber and their experience and whatever. Erica is literally leading the scholarly, I don't know about all the work that's being done. So let me, she is definitely carving out her own powerful path in this madness around financial literacy. So she is soon to be a leading expert into the history, the machinations, the methods, the claims, the deployment, the distribution of this financial literacy monstrosity and madness. And Bryant he can't even be bothered to talk to the woman, to listen to the woman. So it's just, but this is what, okay. But this is what we end up with. And in part, even though they're contradicting each other in this moment, that is Bryant and his President Harris, they're in lockstep around promoting Black entrepreneurialism and capitalism as a solution. So even as she's touting or referring to research that says race is an issue, she's saying, in some vague way, we're gonna help Black people get their credit scores and get access to that money anyway. And by that, she means a forgivable $20,000 loan for entrepreneurs. If that is what you say is going to be, if that is what she and others are meaning to say is going to address this history of limited access regardless of credit scores, never mind those who can't get the credit score, then how is this going to help? Getting Black people bank accounts. And then, to the point we started with, enabling Black men to hold digital assets to benefit from financial innovation. More than 20% of Black Americans own or have owned cryptocurrency assets. But as we've been talking about here, that has more to do with the cryptoganda, the false messaging, the claims that this is going to liberate Black people, and that what they leave out here is that Black people have also suffered the most. We've covered that as well here. Have also suffered the most in the losses related to cryptocurrency. So this idea that she's being helpful because so many Black people are in crypto belies the reality that they're in crypto under false pretenses and with false promises made, and that the industry is already itself accumulated and monopolized to the point where it cannot benefit anybody coming in at the bottom. But she's claiming that by regulating this, by offering more protection to that very industry, that this is going to help these Black investors. No, as we will see, the protection of or as I argue at least, the protection of that industry is not to the benefit of the investors. It's to the benefit of those who are funding her to take whatever position she's going to take, which will be to benefit them. Not the investors, but those whose stock, exchange, crypto exchanges, or existing ownership of the coins and the blockchain they will be the ones that will benefit as they fleece everyone else. Vice President Harris appreciates the ways in which new technologies can broaden access to banking and financial services. That's not access to wealth or better income or anything. She will make sure owners and investors in digital assets benefit from a regulatory framework so that Black men and others who participate in this market are protected. That's the big plan for Black people. Some discussion of reforming tax laws. Vice President Harris will also eliminate unnecessary degree requirements and promote meaningful pathways for those without college degrees for 500,000 federal jobs. Sounds pretty good, except when you're reminded of the fact that she's been in office for 4 years. And her party's been in power for 12 of the last 16. Why wasn't this already done? Pathways that she talked about in one of her barbershop visits to help Black men become school teachers, since only 1%. And then she starts spouting statistics to them in the barbershop. Studies show that if a student has one Black teacher, they do blah, blah, blah. And if they have two, they even have a better life. Okay, again, why haven't you addressed this in the previous 4 years of your vice presidency or in the party's, again, 12 of the last 16 years? Why is this still being discussed after, 70 years since Brown versus Board? I mean, so much. This is a confession of what she and her party have refused to do. Again, we have to move farther to the left. She's still talking about providing Black men with access to internet. It's 2024. If anybody does not have access to internet, particularly in the most powerful and resourced country the world has ever known, that's your fault. Saying you're going to do it now does not deserve praise. She says she's going to work with states to relieve medical debt. What does that mean? I don't know. Ban on corporate price gouging, because that's going to benefit Black families. All right. Incentivize private sector to create new affordable housing. And so you're gonna give tax breaks to slumlords, and we're back to the $25,000 for a down payment on a home to again live in the slums. That you'll be paying. So the slumlords who will sell property that you can buy with a $25,000 down payment will then get tax breaks to sell their slum developed housing to poor Black people whose home and value of that home will never really appreciate, and they will be interest rated into paying exorbitant amounts of money to the people who are getting a tax break to provide that slum. I don't know. It kind of sounds like that. Something crazy like that is what's happening here. But this is being said to be the aid to Black people. And we're still talking about home appraisals, the racial bias in home appraisals. So if you've known all of this, why is it necessary to yet again? Because again, this has all been stuff that has been said. This first time ever nonsense about a tour that she's talking about the same thing that has been promised forever, and that it either doesn't happen or gets proven not to be. And then we're talking about providing home care through Medicare. Well, Obamacare doesn't provide enough? What are you saying? We don't have enough health care? And then we're back to Donald Trump and his Project 2025, the scare tactics. And by the way, what are those scare tactics? Trump wants to raise the price of household goods. Trump wants to make unemployment worse. Trump wants to shortchange black-owned businesses. Trump wants to give tax windfalls to big corporations. Trump wants to terminate public service loan forgiveness. First of all, if you're talking to black people about the coming fascism, if this is all you're talking about, what's the issue? What's the issue? This stuff is already bad. And again, you're in office. You're in office. So right now, forgive all loans. Student and otherwise, for that matter. Let's just do a debt relief. Take a percentage of the Pentagon budget and wipe out everybody's debt. And then make your campaign be, if you want more of that, vote for me. But dangling this kind of stuff in front of our face as if this is something to be terrified of, or something that doesn't already exist, or something that you can't correct, that's absurd. Oh, more investments in HBCUs. And you're going to protect and strengthen the Affordable Care Act. Wait a minute. Why didn't you protect and strengthen the Affordable Care Act? That was your former president's thing. Because as you say in the next paragraph, Trump is going to attack 300,000 black Americans who lost health insurance under him. But he was only able to do that because you didn't previously provide a protective level of health insurance. And if it's something that can be taken and given from one presidency to the next, why are we voting for either one of you? Why are we supporting this structure at all? Healthcare shouldn't be something that we have to vote in every 4 years. So if you're worried about him getting elected and then taking away healthcare, do something now that permanently protects that. Oh, but you're going to build trust between law enforcement and the community. Yeah, I mean, again, if Trump can roll back and send us back by himself to a situation where police will be turned more rapidly against black people, then why haven't you done more to protect or prevent that? Because all you've done is support more funding, more weaponizing, more protection. And you can't get mad. You can't use this whole thing of Trump calling protesters thugs when Obama said the same thing of protesters after Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore, and when Hillary Clinton before that called everybody super predators, called black people super predators. So, and again. Oh boy. Can we just get this back there? All right, appreciate that. It's still not really back there. What happened to... Can I just get you to go back to the way we were? To the way we were. We've talked about this before too, this claim that Harris and Biden increased black wealth to by 60% compared to before the pandemic. And the claims are spurious, and but anyway, just a quick look back at this special plan Harris has for black people. But we'll come back here to the cryptocurrency specific discussion. Yeah. So anyway, as the article here at The Intercept continues, surveys suggest that black Americans wary or shut out of traditional financial institutions have invested in cryptocurrencies at higher rates than other Americans. Critics say that has left Black people more vulnerable to fluctuations in the volatile crypto market. Since releasing the policy document, Harris has not elaborated on the sort of regulatory framework she would like to see. And this is the point that I was getting at before I jumped out ahead of myself earlier. She hasn't said anything about, and they come back to this, I think actually I'm jumping ahead again, but they come back to this point again that she hasn't said whether she's going to choose the SEC or the Commodity Trading the CTC, to Commodities Trading Commission for oversight. And again, that has a lot to do with why the investment or the investment in various politicians is being made, because the crypto industry doesn't want that level of oversight. So to claim that she is going to protect Black investors while not definitively saying, I want the SEC to regulate the market, is part of the hustle. So she's taking all of their money. She's not saying whether she's going to have the SEC or the CTC regulate the industry or to what extent she's going to encourage it. And yet she's using this as a way of trying to promise Black people, and Black men in particular, I'm here for you. All she's here for is the protection of those who already own all of that industry. It's terrible. Black capitalism? Mark Hayes, a senior policy analyst with Americans for Financial Reform and Demand Progress, said his overarching concern was that the industry would secure lax oversight under the guise of regulatory clarity, a wolf in sheep's clothing thing. I agree. The Harris campaign did not comment on whether she supports regulation under the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, sorry about that, or the SEC. Again, that's why I kept jumping ahead, and there it is right there. She hasn't announced it. Leaving aside that question, Ball, the Morgan State professor, said his larger concern was the document's suggestion that Black capitalism would close the racial wealth gap. I hope I said divide. I hope that's a misquote. Because I agree with Diedrich Muhammad. It's not a gap that can be closed. It's a divide. The specific role that crypto has played in the discussion has just been to refurbish those old claims and give them new packaging, Ball said. Still, at least one industry critic said he saw signs for hope in the Harris campaign document. And this is a little bit funny to me, I admit. I have written that no one should be in crypto, said Algernon Austin, the director for race and economic justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. But given that people are, definitely more regulation, more transparency, more safeguards would be an improvement. But see, so Algernon is brilliant. His work at the Economic Policy Institute, his work at the CEPR is valuable. I've interviewed him. We've met. We've spoken. But we disagree here. And I think this is back to where we're forced into disagreement based on where we are in relation to this struggle, and where he is very much within the nonprofit community, the liberal wing of that community, where it was his convening of that meeting that I was once upon a time invited to and said I couldn't speak at, where Jared Bernstein, then the economic advisor to Biden, was there listening and listening to all the nonprofit communities say, the indigenous, the Latino, the Chicano, the women, the Black, everybody was there, talking about how bad everything was. And he said, look, we got nothing in the policy pipeline to help any of this. And skipped up on out of there. So Algernon, he's in those, like, he's got to find hope in what I'm sure is his presidential pick. But I think his comment to and obviously we all our comments are truncated in this. So I don't know that this is all that he has to say on this, but this is exactly where where we disagree in our approach as it's presented here, because he doesn't take into consideration, or this comment from Austin doesn't take into consideration what we've just been talking about in terms of Harris's non-commitment to how she's going to intervene, or who's funding her intervention into this space in the first place. So the idea that she's going to take all this crypto industry money and then put the heavier regulating body on them, it's not logical. It's not logical to put hope in that. It's not logical to expect that. It's more logical to be critical of her engagement with the industry in this way. She should be. It should be. Anyone who argues any form of investment as a solution to inequality should be, if not fully ignored or criticized or condemned, at minimum, the flags have to be raised. So the fact that she's not doing that, or that no politician is doing that, the fact that she's not saying, look, you could do your business thing all you want, I'll throw some money at you to help, but what I'm really going to do to help you is on the outcomes of this economy. And I'm going to make sure that $20+ trillion GDP that we generate in this country every year, that's where we're going to find the support you need to fix your homes and your schools and your communities, to provide all of the health care you need. We're going to give you so much health care. We're going to really push that claim that we're going to stretch our resources because people are just showing up all the time for every little thing. We're going to that's the risk we're going to run, at least for a little bit, and see if we need to course correct later. But initially, everybody's just getting every single thing that they need. All right. Again, the idea that we're going to get protective regulation, even from Harris, is in this issue it just doesn't hold up. It just doesn't hold up. All right, everybody. Obviously, a lot more needs to be said about all of this, and we'll continue to deal with this as best we can, as much as we can. But for now, we're going to move on and get to this Potash discussion about the CIA and drugs are us. Fascinating discussion. Among other things, John Potash has written, directed, and produced CIA Drugs Are Us. He has also produced and written Drugs as Weapons Against Us, to which this film most recently is a sequel. Potash is author of the book and film, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, The CIA War on Musicians and Activists. He also wrote and produced the book and film, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur, State Repression of Black Leaders. He produced the film Shots, Eugenics to Pandemics, released in 2022. John Potash has been featured on C-SPAN's American History TV, the Reels channel, RT, and on the A&E television networks. He has also appeared on hundreds of radio programs and is a regular contributor to Covert Action magazine. He has worked as a psychotherapist for over 35 years, specializing in addictions for the first 10 and trauma therapy for the past 10 years. And with that, we're going to get over to this interview. Again, everybody, please do like, share, subscribe, support the Patreon. Appreciate anything you can do to continue to support our project here. Ring that bell so you don't miss all the forthcoming and upcoming and ever increasing productions here, offerings. and enjoy the rest of your Monday. And of course, peace. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And I'm going to let this interview take us out of here this morning. So again, thank you, everybody. Big shout out to M2May and everybody we saw in Philly this weekend. And look forward to much more. Peace, everybody. Enjoy. All right, John, good to see you once again. Welcome back to the show. I hope all is at least relatively well.
It is. Thank you. Yeah.
So there's a lot to get to as usual with dealing with your work. So let me just invite you to tell us a little bit about this latest film, and Drugs Are Us, and which, you know, for those of us of a certain generation, does Toys R Us even still exist? I don't even know if it still exists.
If what still exists?
Does Toys R Us still exist?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because that's what I thought of. But anyway, I thought it was a play on it. But Drugs Are Us is CIA Drugs Are Us is the new film. Tell us all about this film, and in particular for me and some of us, how is this in addition to, or how does this build upon your last work, as far as I remember, the Drugs Are Weapons Against Us?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I have a subtitle of the film, a Drugs as Weapons sequel. You know, to basically just tell people that it is a sequel to the Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA war on musicians and activists, and it takes three of the key musicians from the other film, Tupac Shakur, of course, Kurt Cobain, and John Lennon, and it just shows the new information I found on those three in particular. And you know what new evidence is out there that you know they were basically murdered. They were manipulated by U.S. intelligence to do certain things, but then when they started basically, you know, promote drugs and inadvertently promote drugs in certain ways, but when they sobered up and started promoting more of their left wing, their anti-war and anti-racist activism, they were done away with by U.S. intelligence. And that's the basic premise that led me to explore that stuff more. Now I also explore more of how U.S. intelligence manipulated the Laurel Canyon scene, which was the big music scene in the 1960s, but this time how the Manson family fit in. And the biggest segment of the film, pretty much the last third or so, last quarter or third of the film, is about the church sex abuse scandal in Maryland, but it really shows how it applies to the United States in general, and it basically shows how the evidence of U.S. intelligence's involvement in that with their program, with their Project MKUltra, which I covered in the last film, and I cover more in this film, and how the evidence is there that they could be creating assets. I mean, CIA assets, whether it be dissociative agents with dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder. Now, dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder, but now it's, they've refined it, and that's my field of practice for therapy. I'm a specialist in trauma, doing trauma therapy, and I do have I've had some clients that are victims of Father Maskell. I've dealt with people, a number of people with dissociative disorder, and still am doing that. And so, this is just touching on an area that I know very, all too well. And so, yeah, that's why I, part of the reason I included it. The other part of the reason is it's that when, investigators kind of got filmmaker to cover what they found out about this Father Joseph Maskell and other priests, and with the murder of this Sister Kathy Sesnick, it ended up gaining wide attention nationally and maybe internationally because of Netflix's draw. One, it was nominated for an Emmy Award, and yet there was more questions and answers at the end of it all. And when I sent evidence to the lead citizen investigator of that Emmy-nominated docuseries, she then started exploring more how its ties to U.S. intelligence. And I sent her evidence that was part of the CIA's MKUltra program.
Yeah, I had seen that documentary. So when I saw you reference it, and I know, both of us being from Maryland and you even more closely to that area, that it was quite fascinating to see the overlap that you put together there. But before we move on to anything beyond to get to, because there's a lot that I would want to ask you to talk a little bit about, but I did want to start off, or after your overview, I wanted to really start with a discussion of broadly and vaguely of conspiracy theory and methodology.
Hmm.
In other words, I have to admit, I mean, I have a certain bias for a variety of reasons towards the work you have been doing, that I've been following and been familiar with for a long time now. Um, but I also have to acknowledge the limitations on all that I would know and be able to assess in reading or watching your work.
Hmm.
So, and I do feel like in this time I've been saying that I think we are in some sort of civilizational crisis around methodology,
Hmm.
where more than ever the prevalence and easy distribution of various ideas
Hmm.
has people all over the place.
Hmm.
So I guess simply put, how do we discern between what you have been doing in this work you've been doing and what is more easily dismissed, or should be in some cases more easily dismissed, as just conspiracy theory or
Right.
silliness? And then in answering, talk a little bit about the methodology you bring to bear in your work, if you would.
Sure. So uh, there was I got well, I was able to get mainstream distribution, North American distribution for this film because of the fact I kind of bring it back to meeting a guy named, I believe his last name was Victoria Stephen. His last name sounds like Victoria. I can't remember exactly what it is. He collaborated with Mumia Abu Jamal on he had made some mainstream films that were documentaries, and then he made long distance runner, I think it was called.
Long distance revolutionary. Yeah, Stephen
Long distance
Vittoria. Yeah,
revolutionary.
yeah. I
Yeah,
wasn't sure. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have the
And
book over
so
here somewhere.
yeah, he showed that long distance revolutionary. I'm sorry, about Mumia Abu Jamal in Philadelphia movie theater that I attended to support him, support Mumia, and I talked to him before, right before the showing, and he just said, I told him about I showed him, gave him my book on Tupac, the FBI war on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. It was titled at the time, of course, back in 2000, 12 or something like that. And he gave me the name of his law firm that that basically was the top documentary law firm in Los Angeles, and he said he thinks they might be interested in the kind of work I'm doing. So when I published the book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the book in 2015, I sent that book to that law firm. I said, would you consider representing me for a film version of this book? And he said, yes, we would. We really like what you did in this book. After he went through it, the Michael Donaldson, the head of Donaldson, Koloff, and Perez, the top documentary firm in LA. He liked my book. He said, we're interested. Yeah, just send us the film, and I'll get one of my attorneys, to help you with this. And so they went through every single fact, every single way I presented it, and in order for me to stop me from, for every piece of evidence to not be able to get sued for illegitimate facts or illegitimate sources or anything like that. So then I got that allowed me, and they put me through the ringer on lots of things, so I could only include what was beyond conjecture of getting sued for. And then then I had to get the insurance company to agree that yes, that if a distributor handled this, they couldn't get sued for the information in this as being fake or false or anything like that. And so I think I was put through the ringer by both the the top documentary law firm because they won loads of lawsuits in court against films, and then by the insurance company that was worried about liability and worried about getting sued. So I'm covered, insurance wise. I'm covered by this law firm, showing the legitimacy of my sources, and I just think when you see the sources, when you see that it's this presidential advisory commission in 1995, for example, on CIA programs, you'll see that these people testifying there are very legitimate. And the therapist that said she was only given a week to prepare for that testimony with her patients, testifying to what the CIA did to them to turn them into dissociative CIA assets. She says a dozen other therapists within 1 week, a dozen other therapists said, I have patients like this, and they went through similar things as to what you're saying. You're going to tell this presidential advisory commission, and please say that we also have I'm also seeing patients that have said given these kinds of accounts. So those two people that you see in my film represent at least dozens of other people that have been reported to give these kinds of accounts. And of course, then you have the victims of the church sex abuse I have in there in the film giving their accounts directly, and then the advocate Gemma Hoskins, who I had put a subtitle in the trailer saying she's just an advocate reading some of the testimony of some people in the clip, and it's not her that was the actual victim, but nonetheless. She has some of the, I have some of the victims. She has victims on her podcast after, the Netflix documentary came out, and her podcast, they say they think they were, victims. They were mind controlled. They were programmed to do things, in a different kind of consciousness and all that. And that they were horrible things. They found blood on their hands.
But essentially, but before we get to, because I do want you to lay out some of that. Where I essentially just wanted to begin with this discussion of the work. So in other words, it's you've scoured a lot of the literature, people's biographies, government documents, statements, testimony that we see, some of the footage. You've in fact, what people will recognize, because you end up making a number of references to some semi-popular Netflix and Hulu and whatever documentaries, but you extend what we see, like one of my favorites, Wormwood. You extend that Deep Creek, Maryland, which wasn't that far from where I went to undergrad in Frostburg State, which is just weird. That right down the road, but my point is you've done all this, and then there was some sort of editorial and legal I want to say peer review or editorial process that vetted your work, and so I just because admittedly, even as I have a bias for it, a lot of what you outline here is, I mean, it's disturbing, it's wild, it seems cut from films, but the point is it's substantial, it's supported, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because again, it's very easy for a lot of different things to be said these days.
And so I appreciate that, Jared, because when I first started investigating this whole subject, this was the early 1990s. And just because I was working as an addictions counselor starting in 1989, I'm interviewing a bunch of people. They're giving me firsthand testimony of, well, they may be drug dealers, but they're not the biggest dealers. The biggest dealers are the CIA, who have the planes and boats to get the drugs into our country. And then I get to the CIA project stuff, Project MK Ultra stuff, which I read about and saw the CIA documents on Project MK Ultra. A lot of these were published by U.S. Senate Church Committee in the 1970s, and Senator Frank Church headed that committee, and they unveiled, the CIA director supposedly shredded all those documents, which was illegal. He wasn't supposed to be shredding all those documents, but he didn't get to all the documents that were saved in the accounting department. and the accounting department had about what researchers believe was about 10% of the total documents. So they were still 20,000 pages of documents in the accounting department. So the real number was probably about 200,000 pages under Project MK Ultra, and there's probably a lot more than that, even in subsidiary groups that were helping with all this. But nonetheless, that's some of the sources that I show in my film. Regarding Tupac, as you know, I first came out with that book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur, and Black Leaders, now called the FBI War on Tupac Shakur, State Repression of Black Leaders, but because it was republished. But for that, I did primary source interviews with Tupac's mentor, Watani Tayahimba, who was his first manager. His name is often censored and hidden, but he was a one-time national. He was a founding national security director for the New African People's Organization. When Tupac founded the New African Panthers, I mean, he didn't find it; he was the leader of it. It was founded by some earlier folks, but they were attempting to replicate the Black Panthers, and they elected Tupac as the youngest national leader that they had of the New African Panthers when they were active in 8 to 10 cities. And so that kind of stuff, when Watani Tayahimba confirmed all, just like told me a lot of this information, told me the history of the Shakurs, and Chokwe Lumumba, Tupac's first national lawyer. Also, I interviewed him for an hour or two, and he confirmed a lot of this information and certain facts about the Atlanta trial, for example, and so I got so much primary source information. I went to the New York Library to get all the newspaper accounts of the Atlanta situation, what happened, and they confirmed that witnesses said, white and Black witnesses said that the police, these supposedly off-duty police officers, fired at Tupac first, and he just fired back in self-defense. So these are lots of closest to primary source information you can get. Watani Tayahimba witnessed it firsthand from the other side of the traffic light, that these guys, fired at Tupac first, these police officers. And this is the kind of work I did it really started researching Black Panthers in the early 90s, Tupac Shakur in particular, from the start of it was actually early December of 1994 onwards, because of the shooting in the Quad recording studio. And then I came out with the original article saying, is the FBI targeting Tupac like it did his Black Panther parents, in a local zine, because all the white, controlled national activist magazines couldn't accept this article, except for Covert Action Quarterly. Now, Covert Action Quarterly probably would have accepted it, though they didn't until 1998. But there was a spy, I believe, I'm going to say this outright, I believe this guy named Phil Smith, who was in Covert Action Quarterly. I walked into their office. I was living in Washington, D.C. I walked into their Washington, D.C. office. I said, here's this article. I want to hand it. I want to submit it. I had sent it, to you by snail mail. Here it is again. He said, oh, I got that article, and let me just motion you out here. And he grabbed me, put his arm around me and tried to motion me out of the building, out of the office into the hallway, while I was trying to go to Lou Wolf. I saw Lou Wolf. I was trying to give it to him. And so this guy steered it away in 1995, in the spring of 1995, from being published before Tupac was dead, was murdered. And so they said they never got that article, but they happened to fire Phil Smith, and they fired another woman, Terry Allen, who was making deals with George Soros behind their back, behind the founders of Phil Agee's, and I think it was in Ellen Ray. It was I think it was William Schaap, William Schaap was they were the controlling members of Covert Action Quarterly at the time. They didn't know about my article then, because this guy Phil Smith hid it. Maybe Terry Allen did too, but either way, by 1998, of course, they did accept it and publish it. But this is what's going on in these in all the media sources, that they're being censored with infiltrators. Somebody said there was a CIA document that said we boasted about having undercover agents in virtually every organization, every media organization in the country, to do this, to divert and censor this kind of information.
So, okay, and again, one more, if I can, sort of,
Sure.
what do they call it? 30,000-foot question.
Mhm.
What is your overall thesis involves a lot of discussion of intelligence agencies, their deployment of drugs, as you say, as weapons against us,
Mm.
uh, infiltration, as you were just describing, manipulation of the press, et cetera, and so forth. To what end is all of this happening as you understand it? And what is it that your work is designed to encourage in your audiences?
So yeah, I mean, the end to me, their end is social control to keep accumulating more and more of the wealth away from the general populace. That's 99.9% of the populace, and that 1.1% or 1%, what people are saying, to accumulate more of the wealth and more of the control over all of us in order to subvert us and to take away our wealth and power and just turn us into you know um, kind of slaves of their system that they create. And their history is incredibly racist. They're incredibly prejudiced in general against anyone but white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. But they use us. They use the Jews, the Catholics, and the people of color to get what they want, to help them with their agenda, with their ugly agenda. But in the end, they have their history with the eugenics, and which was outlining how everyone but them, but the wealthiest white Anglo-Saxon Protestants are, everyone else is inferior. That's what they said back then with the eugenics era of the early 1900s. And so they want to control all the resources and have a slave society. It really is the ultimate thing they want to do. But one of the ways they do this is by having us control ourselves. Their CIA documents say that they want to get us to think we're working in our own interest when we're working in their interest. So I mean, I'm fine with weed, marijuana being legal, but we have to understand that when they can put stuff in the marijuana to mess up our heads, which they do, and I counsel people whose heads were permanently messed up. People at your college. I counseled someone at Morgan State University who was a great student, doing great, had great potential, and all of a sudden, his mother said something happened to him. He smoked some marijuana. He wasn't a weed smoker, but a friend encouraged him, and something was in it. There was something in it that made him lose his mind relatively. He had to drop out of school. He couldn't get the great grades he was getting anymore. He couldn't talk so clearly. He rambled more than being clear minded. And this is happening in the communities. They're putting something in the weed. It's more in the black communities. It's sometimes in the white communities too, but it's much more in the black communities. So someone's putting something in the weed. Is it some of my dealers said, well, it's roach killer to keep the rats away from their stashes. But is that by incidental, or is it on purposeful? I would argue, because it's more in the black community and the white community, it is probably more purposeful, and it is by someone connected to U.S. intelligence directly or indirectly. That's my thinking on it. But so this is the kind of stuff you have to watch out for with the illegal weed, with the dispensary weed. It's a matter of developing a habit that takes away our best, clearest, sharpest thinking, because we have to be at our sharpest these days, because these things are unfolding. The kind of tactics they're using against us are happening quicker than we realize right now. They're accelerating. And when it comes to ecstasy, that's hurting our memory, according to the best studies. And they're acting like it's the best, medication for trauma, which is a joke, because EMDR is right now the best technique for handling trauma. And EMDR has no side effects. It just basically stimulates the brain to help itself and to heal itself. And then acid, the other one appears to be damaging our brain in ways they don't know exactly how, but the leading, some top studies, at least 4 of them, say there's some kind of damage happening, and they're not sure what. It appears to hurt some emotional control and things like that. And so they're using so many different sophisticated ways with rappers' lyrics. They're getting they're writing lyrics for rappers and getting them to promote it. I mean, obviously Eminem was a tool of some of that, but some other black rappers and different other rappers were all promoting ecstasy, Molly, they're calling it, and acid and all kinds of different drugs. And even of course, Tupac was sobering up at the end of his life, but before that, he had sadly developed a daily weed habit, and incidentally promoted it a bit. But then before he sobered up, and when he was high, when he was stoned, that's when he said if he wasn't stoned, he probably wouldn't have entered that quad studio when they shot him 3 times and nearly killed him right then. One of their major assassination attempts of Tupac, U.S. intelligence's assassination attempts of Tupac. So this is some of the ways that they're using these drugs, and that's one of the main pieces of the film.
And so you ended, or you started with where you end the film, which is some of your thoughts on dispensaries and whatnot. But you begin the film, and I even tried to come up with something cute to say, because you begin the film with a focus on the Ivy League universities.
Yeah.
And I was trying to, the green of the ivy is connected to the green of weed and the brown of heroin. And, like brown should have been named after the color of the heroin based on what you were basically laying out about these institutions.
Yeah.
But so in other words, the point being that you trace a long history of the most elite institutions, out of which would of course come the intelligence community,
right?
As using, first of all, building their wealth and their financial empires on the drug trade, but then also applying this for particular political and social manipulation purposes.
Right.
So I don't know how, if you want to if we just maybe talk a little bit about those foundations that you start with.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I just, I jokingly reverse, Karl Marx's religion is the opiate of the masses, to say, opium is the religion of the masses. Because the Ivy League universities were founded by these white
John, I have to
Anglo-Saxon.
interrupt you. I'm sorry. Forgive me, everybody. I have to interrupt you because that deserves.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
That was a bar. That religion being open to the masses, but opium is say it again.
Opium is the religion of the masses these days, and so that's what they turned it into. But back then they knew. I mean, Karl Marx said he's just reflecting how it was so given that the wealthiest use opium to basically subvert the masses to kind of calm the masses and to keep them at bay. Because when you're opiated, you're dozing off, or you're just feeling the effects and not able to get anything done. And when you got the opiate addiction, of course, you're just chasing that high all the time. And even when you can perform, it's just hard in between to do anything else. But and so the wealthiest knew this early on, and that's why opium was so important to them, because they knew they could control populaces with the opium. I believe. I mean, so they opiated the Chinese. They had an opium war in mid 1800s that the American wealthiest were part of, because the American wealthiest loved the English aristocracy and the English East India Company, British East India Company, it was called. Were barred from China, and then when they, in order to force China to allow the opium in there, they had 2 major opium wars. And they won those wars against China, and the mass of China was opiated like crazy at that point. When China was divided up by the European Western groups, and so those same wealthiest opium traffickers, they started the Ivy League universities. In Baltimore, we have Canton, the area of Canton, and Canton was named after Canton in China, because that an opium shipper thought that the Canton community in Fells Point, Baltimore, Maryland, looked like Canton in China, and so it's why he named it that. And so Baltimore's like very intimately connected to that opium shipping from way back when.
That's
And
crazy. That
yeah,
connection
isn't
is
that
crazy. Yeah.
so, and that was in I found that in, I believe it was a city paper history of the area, and they didn't make any other connections except that, it was just a funny coincidence, but it's obviously part of the whole scheme of things, of the way things worked back then. And so then they used all this wealth to start these supposedly top Ivy League schools that are just major, ways to shape people's minds the way they want to, because they try to get all the students thinking like they're the best in the world and all they're the smartest in the world, and that's of course a joke, a ridiculous joke. And the joke's on us though, because they end up using their incredible wealth and connections to get into these top positions in society, and they pretend like they're the smartest professors, which is ridiculous. They're the most pompous professors, and their quality of work is, as I've experienced it, is just not that high. I mean, we got a few that stand out, but overall they're just as average. They're just average professors, or often below average, because when you have that kind of immodesty, it really hurts your best exploration of the facts, in my mind. And so I think that that was the beginning of it all, and then they use their wealth and power to gain these positions in society to maintain their version of history, and their version of history is the oppressor's version of history, oppressing the populace, and then they are able to promote these drugs by owning so much of the media industry. And I showed in my first film, I showed how they own so much of the media, and that's why podcasts like yours are so important, Jared, of course, to get different information out there. But and so when they do that with the media, they can also promote these drugs any which way, call LSD a mind expansion drug, which is ridiculous. Anyone who's met a longtime deadhead knows that his mind is not expanded; his mind is retracted, and he acts like an idiot. But he thinks he's creative and brilliant, but he's just bumbling fool. Sadly enough, I'm sorry to say. And not all deadheads. I mean, I used to like the Grateful Dead, and I'm glad I mean, their music's okay, but
Oh,
I got over it because of the connections. U.S. intelligence was all over their earliest concerts with spies, and those spies, use their astroturf campaign, which is a public relations term, to pretend grassroots, campaigns to promote acid, to promote psychedelics in general, and then they use them to promote ecstasy, like Molly and all that, and then they, you also use them to promote any other drugs they wanted to mess up people's minds with, and that's the history of the CIA's Project MK Ultra, which started in 1953. Was supposedly ended in 1973 with the shredding of all the documents, and because the Church Committee was investigating it, but it continued. All the best evidence is that it continued. We know that FBI's counterintelligence program that was started in the 50s also supposedly ended in 1971, but an agent, Wes Swearingen, said it continued at least into the mid 90s, when he came out with his memoir and said his fellow agents said they just put different names on the FBI's counterintelligence program. So when Tupac became a national Black leader, representing 8 to 10 cities of New African Panthers, of course they were going to target him when he then came out with his solo album debut, Tupacalypse Now, which was a very political album attacking the FBI and the CIA in some of his lyrics, and the Bush administration in some of his lyrics. And of course they were going to target him, sadly enough. And and that's what they did. And of course, Death Row Records was a CIA intelligence front company. I mean, the best evidence says that Russell Poole, this white high-level police detective, says when he investigated, as an official investigator of the Biggie Smalls murder, he investigated Death Row. He found dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of Death Row Records. He asked his superiors, what are they doing there? And they told him, you can consider them troubleshooters or covert agents. And so that's quoted in the book Labyrinth by a mainstream journalist named Randall Sullivan. Randall Sullivan didn't do much with that except put that quote in there. He didn't, he wasn't, I don't either he wasn't allowed or he didn't allow himself to go further with that. But obviously, at the very last line of the book says, Russell Poole says, "So I sent all my files to the FBI, even though all my friends warned me not to, but I did it anyway, thinking if I can't trust them, who can I trust?" Nothing was done with his files. Of course, he ends up murdered, and so later, and that's in my the epilogue of my book, the new version of the FBI War on Tupac Shakur. I describe his murder as it was described to me by a co-writer of Russell Poole's, Michael Carlin. Now in the film, I show the extension of. Did you not see that epilogue ever? I'll take and tell you about, but it's gruesome. It's really bad.
No,
I'll send you the book. I'll send you the new version of the book then, Jared, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's now published by Microcosm Publishing. Tupac's New York lawyer, Michael Warren, kind of encouraged me to try that Microcosm Publishing because they were making an offer to me, and he thought it would get more, and he was right. It would get more kind of legs. It would be more widely distributed all over the world because Microcosm's a bigger publisher than I had originally. And so Microcosm did get it all over the world. The problem was they cut out all the kind of pictures and pictures of documents and stuff. So that's the only bad part of it. But the good part of it is it's got an epilogue that gives the details of these extension of what happened to Afeni Shakur to 1921 and her murder, her mysterious death. What happened to Russell Poole with his mysterious death, and how when he offered evidence to a police investigator in Los Angeles, to like a sheriff's department, he came in offering evidence, and he ends up dying in that office offering that evidence.
Now that part I knew. Yeah, right. The claim was it was a heart attack, which is, but in terms of having, but you're now saying you're convinced with definitively that it was in fact murder.
Yeah,
and then, but you also just said something that I wasn't familiar with either. That I was not even aware that there was any suspicion at all around Afeni's death.
So remember,
I'm way behind on that too.
That's okay. Yeah, and I'll send you the book with the epilogue. But basically, so Afeni was married to a guy, a preacher, a priest, a preacher, whatever he was, a reverend, who she gets divorced from because he was stealing from Tupac's estate up a storm. Okay, she gets divorced from a year before her death, and at her strange death, there was a lot of strange facts around her death. I don't have time to go into all the details, but they give her body to that guy who she was in a bitter divorce trial with, instead of to her daughter, Setua Shakur, or her sister, her biological sister, Glow, and so Gloria. And so this is some of the crap that happened around her death. There's just a bunch of other things that happened that, it's just a bit mysterious. Now, with Russell Poole's death, Michael Carlin said he talked to someone at the scene who said that they used a defibrillator to cause him a heart attack. They held him down and used this shock device to cause him a heart attack in that room. They used a bunch of cops. What's his name? Just forgot his name all of a sudden, but the head of security, head of security for Death Row Records was a former police officer, Reggie Wright Jr. Reggie Wright Sr. was head of the gang, police unit. Reggie Wright Jr. Was head of security for Death Row, and Reggie Wright Jr. was there at that meeting, helping kill Russell Poole, according to Michael Carlin's witness at that scene. So that's what Michael Carlin told me directly. And so, yeah, it's ugly stuff. But nonetheless, so the film has Greg Kading being interviewed by Benjamin Crump, the civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, in the film that Mopreme Shakur helped produce, that I was in also on A&E, who killed Tupac, or who shot Tupac, I believe. But that was a series when Tupac's death, which was a much better series than most. And so he's on there, Greg King's on there, and they said, so what did you offer, Keefe D, Dwayne Keefe D Davis, Dwayne Keefe D Davis? And he says, well, we offered him full, he'd get off all of his charges of, drug trafficking if he just said what, he said. And so it's a joke, he'll get off of what Greg Kading had said in the book was, likely life imprisonment to say that he was part of Tupac's murder. And he also wouldn't be, convicted of Tupac's murder, that he was, and so.
So that's the reason for the more recent so-called the capture or confession or whatever, so that he would not get prosecuted and spend life in prison for some other stuff.
Right, for drug trafficking, for drug dealing, like major high level drug dealing, and so
and he's not in prison now.
What's that?
He's out free now.
I don't know. I don't even know where he's at right now. But all I know is that this whole thing was set up for him to say what he said, and basically, possibly likely lie. And so I show him also saying, I showed Dwayne Keefe D Davis in an interview, as you saw in the film, saying that, Orlando was beat up and he had to go to the ER between the fight at the scuffle at the MGM hotel lobby and Tupac's murder. He says he went to the emergency room in hospital emergency room. And you know how long hospital emergency rooms take. And he says he came out of there with his right arm, he says, in a sling. He says his right arm was in a sling. So then he goes and gets a gun and shoots Tupac with his right arm supposedly in the sling. And so really, it's just such a joke. The whole thing was the whole setup. That it was just this Dwayne Keefe D Davis that did it is a joke. And so then I got Kading lying about those two police officers that were in Death Row Records. He says these two guys weren't in Death Row Records. And then Nick Broomfield, in his film that only came out in England, he gets the head of the LA Police Department, the police chief at the time, saying one film that, no, these two guys were part of Death Row Records. We did know that these two guys were part of Death Row Records security. So, that just lays out like Greg Kading is ridiculously unreliable as a source. And he's a disinformation agent of the Los Angeles Police Department that was brought out of, he was caught lying, as Russell Poole says in the film, in a blurb, he was caught that Greg Kading was caught lying in court. So he was, kind of forced into early retirement. And they brought him out of retirement to do this kind of work, to come out with this, ridiculous information. And that's the work he did for U.S. intelligence, I believe, is to set this all up to make it look like it was someone other than U.S. intelligence. It was a gang related, shooting related to the scuffle that they set up to make it look like all that. And so that's what they did to.
So there was there's something else I wanted to ask you about that I think it's somewhat related to this question about methodology. That because you as I've always said, when I've read your book or books or watched your documentaries, there's just it's the information, it's overwhelming. The names, the acronyms, I mean, there's just so much there. And for me, it's sometimes hard to just, you got to watch it again, reread, you got to, in this most recent film, for instance, one moment where I felt I would want help filling some of the gaps here is that unless I missed something, you talk about Yoko Ono and, infamously always associated with breaking up the Beatles and all this other kind of stuff. And you talk about, again, following the track you developed throughout the film, that intelligence agencies or elite levels of power want to use drugs to slow, manipulate, confuse, disrupt the work of potentially threatening artists. So more so actually to get the artist to inadvertently promote these drugs to slow down the masses, slow down activists,
and slow down the activist communities, to promote these drugs to activist communities, and then slow them down in their anti-war and anti-racist work. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
In you and in this part, you talk about how Yoko Ono introduced John Lennon to heroin,
Hmm.
and you give some background of which I had never heard anything about. I never even thought about her background, coming out of some Japanese aristocracy.
Right.
Uh, but what I wrote down in my notes was that that there's I said speculation based on her being an aristocrat and getting high, which is my note. Was what I'm saying to myself is there's really a lot of reasons why somebody, or particularly rich, famous, young celebrities, but anybody, there's a
Hmm.
lot of reasons why people take to various drugs.
Hmm.
So how is it that you're convinced that Yoko and John just didn't take to heroin, just like a lot of different people would try and experiment when they have money and time and access and they're young and they're cool? How is it that we're supposed to? How are you connecting Yoko, her aristocratic background, to intelligence, to the goal of the agencies, as you just summarized a second ago?
So, well, you can basically say that there's three top drugs that that Project MK Ultra was, really big when promoting. I mean, LSD was probably the most focused on drug that they were promoting. And so here they somebody doses, a dentist of George Harrison's doses John Lennon, without his knowledge, in his coffee, puts acid in his coffee, and has him trip for the first time without his knowledge. And he was infuriated. He thought, "How could you do this?" And he said, "How could you do this to us?" And all that, from according to eyewitnesses, like his wife and George Harrison's girlfriend, according to their interviews. And then, so that's in the first film, Drugs and Weapons Against Us, and just mentioned in the second film. But then you've got, so it's incredible that Dennis would do this. And meanwhile, right before this happened, we had this Robert Lashbrook, assistant director of Project MK Ultra, coming to the U.S. saying, we're going to put acid in as many musicians' hands as possible and bring tons of acid and agents and all that. And then you got it's John Lennon, some other, suspected undercover agents that were musicians, like, David Van Cortlandt Crosby. I say Van Cortlandt because it's one of the wealthiest families in the country. Own, thousands of acres in New York. Van Cortlandt
And they
Expressway,
usually
all that
leave
stuff.
that part out when they
Yeah,
mention his name. You don't
yeah. So
hear
anyway,
the
right,
mention.
exactly. So David Crosby, the Crosby, Stills and Nash and all that crap. Anyway, he gets him and some actors get John Lennon to trip the second time, to take acid the second time. Other people close to him got him to trip more. He's tripping a bit, by between 65 and 1967 or so, 60, 6 or 7. He says, I was tripping, he says, I thought I was losing my mind. He said to interviewer, Rolling Stone interviewer, Jan Wenner. And so I stopped acid completely because I thought I was losing my mind on acid. I stopped for about a year and a half or 2 years. I stopped acid completely. And then his publicist, who represented all these other highly suspected musicians slash spies, like, David Crosby, like, this guy, from the Mamas and the Papas, Papa John Phillips, who did some unbelievable things, as you saw in my film, and like others, and Frank Zappa and all.
And I'm
They,
sorry, forgive me for interrupting again, but
yeah, no worries.
it was disgusting.
Yeah, it
What
was, wasn't it? And so,
And I
yeah,
had
yeah,
no idea watching her on the show. What's it called? On the TV show with Valerie Bertinelli back in the day,
right, right,
the daughter. And then you hear about her
we
going
all
into
watched that.
drugs and all of that.
Right, right.
And,
It's unbelievable.
but they just describe it as it's just a regular, child actor thing. You had no idea.
Yeah,
I don't remember ever hearing about all of that
yeah, child actor
incredible
thinks their
levels of
father
trauma.
didn't inject you with drugs. Yeah, right. So anyway, so this guy convinces John Lennon to trip again, and then Yoko Ono promotes acid to John Lennon again. So Yoko Ono promotes, even though it damaged. John Lennon said, "I thought I was losing my mind on acid." Stopped it for 2 years, and here's Yoko Ono getting him to trip again too, in a big way. So Yoko Ono was a major force to get him to trip again, even though he thought he really messed him up for so badly. And so when she got him to trip again, along with the publicist, um, he then was throwing up, vomiting before live concerts because he was so emotionally out of control. He would get so anxious before live concerts, despite all his concerts with the Beatles. When he had to do concerts again, he was throwing up, and that's what acid can do to people. And so she pushes him to do acid again, and she pushes it, and she gets him doing heroin for the first time. So that is going way against anything it sounds like a girlfriend who cares about you, or a wife that cares about your well-being. When you said this, it made me lose my mind for a while. No, take it again, take it again. I mean, really, so with her aristocratic background and these other things, no really support. It's just so much to her. I only had so much space in the film to show all the evidence against her, but that's just some of it.
But I mean, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I admit I would want to see a little bit more in
yeah,
connecting her to those entities. I mean, the circumstantial
yeah,
points you make, especially in the context of the whole film. I mean, I get it, but
yeah,
that was one part that at least stuck out to me in terms of I'm not
right.
um
Yeah.
there because there's, for instance, there's if if I remember correctly, you have much more in making the connection that I'm looking for when it comes to
Courtney
Courtney
Love.
Love.
Right, right.
Uh and I had seen the Soaked in Bleach documentary. I admit I thought that made very compelling arguments.
Yes.
You reference that in a little bit in this one, and go more
Yeah.
into her background, which it just I will say the only thing that slightly bothered me about that part, to be honest, is that when you get into her background as um a sex worker and in the, I don't know, the stripping industry or whatever,
It's not just
it
stripping though, but yeah,
or
the
sex
Japanese
work. I mean,
mafia in Asian countries, in 2 different Asian countries.
okay, so my point is, no, what I'm saying that
Yeah.
bothered me about that is that it felt at one point that it just felt like you're demonizing the industry or those people. Not
Oh, I
that
don't
the
wanna
industry doesn't mean to be, but it just felt like as evidence for her guilt was the fact that she was a sex worker, and that part made
nah.
me a little bit like I don't want to,
Oh, yeah, I don't wanna
I
guilt
don't want to go
people in the
too
sex
far. Yeah,
industry. Yeah, I don't
right.
wanna
Yeah,
guilt
yeah,
people in the
yeah.
sex industry, but I do wanna guilt her
Mm.
for her massive connections to the murder of Kurt Cobain. Because, I mean, because the evidence is overwhelming, in terms of he
It
was
does look
divorcing her,
bad.
he's cutting her out of his will. This guy says, that he admits to Hank Harrison on his deathbed that he was working for U.S. intelligence when he met her, when he met Courtney Love when she just turned 17 years old, and took her to England to give tons of drugs and LSD to all these musicians, copying what Robert Lashbrook, the assistant director of Project MK Ultra, did in the 60s. And then repeated those same behaviors all in top music, punk music scenes, the punk, like, anti-war, anti-racist kind of music scenes, in the US. She did it in Portland, she did it in LA. She married the top punk musician in LA. We thought he was marrying this left-wing punk musician, in Courtney Love, and he says he really found he was marrying this right-wing Phyllis Diller type, who was said, "I slept with generals in Alaska, and they told me wars were good for us. So you don't know anything than pretending and acting anti-war." So she's just a serious piece of work. People like, I think, some members of Bikini Kill, this top, like, leftist punk band, female band that was started by Kathleen Hanna. They were very influential. Some of them were sex workers, I believe, and yet they were really good people, really, great, not sex workers, but they were strippers, not sex workers. but they did some stripping, I believe, to make it, some of them, but either way, I just know that, it's not to impugn either sex workers or the stripping industry. It's to impugn Courtney Love because of what she's really about, with all this evidence against her, for being involved in, these really ugly activities for U.S. intelligence, I believe.
So listen, John, I don't know, how I'm not entirely sure of your time or how much
I get
more of the film you wanted to discuss, but
the part
that
about the part with the Manson family and the Black Panthers, surely I'd like to.
yeah. So I mean, y- yeah. Talk, again, it's just it's a bit mind-boggling. So
Hear you.
this is the that involves what you started off our discussion with a little bit of the hypnotic manipulation of sort of programming people to become killers, uh and then yeah. So what is this? What are you saying happened with the Manson
Well, it's
crimes?
really it's ugly stuff, and it's like a theme throughout. And yeah, I couldn't really go over. It's a 2 hour and 18 or 19 minute
Right.
film, so it's
Yeah.
long as is. I can't sell a three hour film. No one's going to watch a 3 hour film. But surely I would have loved to give more details. And we'll see. Maybe I'll make a book out of it someday, but I don't know if I get the time for that even. But nonetheless, yeah, there's so much more I could put in all of this, but with the Manson family, what came out was the fact that, so this guy named Tom O'Neill, who was writing an article for Premiere Magazine, and he's doing that in the 1990s. I think it was 1990 or so, and it was on the anniversary of '89. It was the anniversary of the Manson family, maybe conviction or something like that. And so he came to find that maybe it was 1999. Either way, it was 20 years before he came out with his book. He came to find that his evidence was pointing to a lot more than he realized about when he was going to come out with this Premiere article from Premiere Magazine. And so he wouldn't stop investigating. He investigated the subject for 20 years, and he came upon the letters between this guy, Dr. Jolly West, is just one example of things he came upon. But one of them was the letters between Dr. Louis Jolly and West, who was famous for interviewing Jack Ruby, who shot, Lee Harvey Oswald, the murder of President Kennedy. And but Dr. Jolly and West basically was a U.S. intelligence, doctor who used experiments for MK Ultra to create hypnotized, programmable people with hypnosis and drugs. He could cause dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and get people to do what he wanted them to do. And so here he was, all of a sudden working. And so he had letters. This guy, Tom O'Neill, the writer researcher, who came out with the book Chaos back in 2019, or it was 2018 or 2019. He found the letters between the head of MK Ultra, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, and Dr. Jolly and West, constant letters going back and forth between them about his MK Ultra, Dr. Jolly and West's MK Ultra work, including, up to, now Dr. Jolly and West ends up working at the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in the 1960s, about 1967 or 68 or so, where the Manson family is living in San Francisco. They're going to this clinic. He said daily at times for 6 months. They're going at least weekly, if not daily, to this clinic where Dr. Jolly and West is working out of. And they're getting, and another CIA agent confirmed this, that they were getting their acid from there. And I show him in the book, that other CIA undercover, that former CIA agent whistleblower, Mike Baker. They were getting their acid there, and they were also likely getting hypnotized by Dr. Jolly and West to become what they became, which is murderers. They murdered Sharon Tate. They murdered several others. And Sharon Tate was one of the lead conveners in Hollywood. She was a famous actress and Roman Polanski's wife, and starred in some of his films, and was convening a group called the White Panthers, which were named that to support the Black Panthers in Los Angeles, and give money and raise money for the Black Panthers and to support them in general. And that included, Donald Sutherland was part of that group of the White Panthers, Jane Fonda, Gene Seberg, a number of great, top actors at the time. So they were lending support, like moral support, promotional support, and money, and et cetera, to the Black Panthers. They were also part of the anti-war movement in a big way. So this is some of the great work they were doing. And here, Manson family comes in and murders, the convener in her place, in her house of that Sharon Tate, scared all of the others off of that kind of work, and also, scared them off from their anti-war work. And they wrote smeared pig on the walls to make it look like the Black Panthers did that murder, carried out that murder and stuff like that. And so that's, some of it's in there.
It's fascinating. And was it you who said something had raised speculation around Jane Seberg's early death too?
Oh,
Maybe my memory is.
no, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I mean,
because she comes up in COINTELPRO discussions. That's at some point, but anyway, my memories. So
yeah, I know there is, I know in Ward Churchill's great books, and there was a movie done on Gene Seberg. They suggest that it's possible that U.S. intelligence had tried to set up and murdered her,
right,
stop her great work around that to make it look like the Black Panthers killed her, when it was really, U.S. intelligence likely for stopping her from doing the kind of work she was doing.
That's right. That's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, John, I'll make sure the link to, first of all, how and when can people see this film?
So it's free on Tubi right now, and but for $1.99 you can see it on YouTube Movie Rents or Google Play, and that's where you can check out the film. Because when you give $1.99, you don't have any ads. But with Tubi, they're very short ads, and they're just once every maybe 10 minutes you got an ad or 2 or 3 at most. So it's not too bad for free.
Okay, right on. I'll put a couple links.
And I just want to say if they buy the DVD, there's 18+ bonus scene minutes of that you can check out too on the DVD if people still have DVD players like myself.
Hey, I don't, but if anybody does, maybe it's worth it to get one to get this extra footage,
Maybe.
John, listen, I greatly appreciate you coming through again, and continued good work. I appreciate the sort of tireless work you've been doing for a long time, and happy to have you back at another time whenever
that'd be great,
it's convenient.
Jared. That'd be great. Thanks a lot, Jared. It's great talking with you again.
Right on.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.